Hello, and welcome back to another encouraging, inspiring, and including episode of the Achieving Unity Leadership System weekly podcast, where we help turn chaos into connection and purpose into action. I am your host, Mark Intrican, founder of the Achieving Unity Leadership System, available at www.achievingunity.com, which is dedicated to all leaders, personally and professionally, in improving our lives through encouraging, inspiring, and including others. EII, encouraging, inspiring, and including others. We must remember that unity is not a soft skill. It is a leadership discipline. Today, I am honored to introduce Maria Garaitonandia. You get her name said correctly, such a pretty name. Garaitonandia, who has over 20 years of experience. Maria helped leaders and teams untangle the real obstacles behind miscommunication, conflict, and stalled progress so that we can all work better together and get results faster. She has trained over 8,000 leaders across the US and LATAM, which is Latin America, includes Mexico, Central America, South America, sometimes parts of the Caribbean. She teaches a lot of people. She expresses this benefit to a lot of people all over North and South America. Maria brings practical strategies that helps teams communicate clearly, give effective feedback, manage expectations, and build trust that drives collaboration. If your team struggles with silos, delayed communication, or unresolved tension, this conversation will open up your eyes. It will open your eyes so much. And as we listen what Maria has to tell us and share with us. We're invited to see not just the challenges that we could face, but the potential that exists when people are encouraged, inspired, and included, the EII, in building a better future together, achieving unity. But first, before we put Maria on the camera, we're going to before we delve into this delightful discussion, we're going to let me briefly introduce my company, Reality Focus Dynamics, where this all began. The Achieving Unity Leadership podcast opens up with real conversations for leaders. This is for all types of leaders. I've mentioned that over and over. A leader doesn't mean some high CEO, some big company. Leaders start at home, starts with individuals, goes to couples, relationships, families, goes into the social arena, the corporate arena. It does go there. But this is about all leaders navigating division, frustration, and change. And that's what impacts each and every one of us as we go from day to day, taking that leadership to a new level, not one of the past, not a culture from way back when, but instead taking what we've learned, building it forward, and being better leaders for all of us. Sometimes it seems that leadership maybe feels harder than it should. Seems like disconnection is growing all around the United States. It goes from us, it goes all around the world. Then that frustration that comes from that disconnection is draining the people, excuse me, and is draining the teams that we build to grow. That frustration just seems to drain us from day to day. Our good intentions seem to be colliding with real world pressures. What we have to do is learn that unity, working together, all of us, as friends, as partners, as teammates, as corporate to corporate, business to business, we must learn that unity is not a soft skill. It's not just helping someone up the stairs, helping someone from their chair. Unity is a leadership strategy, one that we're all learning that we can use, again, from that corporate person that's a CEO of a multi multi-billion-dollar company anymore. It's not multi-million anymore. It's the billions of dollars from that type leadership back down to the individual leadership. It's a strategy that we all need to take full control over as we grow forward, helping and building with others. So what we mean by achieving unity is encouraging progress without enabling dysfunction. We want to inspire action without forcing agreement. And I know a lot of times we're in meetings, we're in communication, we're collaborating, but you'll see a lot of people just, yeah. We don't question. We don't say, wait a minute, I don't understand that. What do you mean by that? Where did you get that information? Not rudely, but truly enabling that unity to come out and understand where we both stand and that the information that we're working with is true. We want to include voices while maintaining accountability. Doesn't mean that we're going to be unity and just go listen to everybody and do what everybody else says. No, we know what we need to do. We're all educated. We want to include those voices, but we want to maintain our own accountability, which brings about our responsibility. We can do this by building better businesses, better lives, and a better world, one clear conversation at a time. Again, I am your host, Mark Intrican. I'm the founder of Reality Focused Dynamics and the Achieving Unity Leadership System. It is a system. It used to be a tool. Now we understand it's a system we need to practice every day. I work with leaders, I work with teams, I work with families, work through all the problems we have with navigating conflict, change, and sometimes what we feel is complexity. That's where I work with my system of listening to dialogue, writing it down, breaking it down, review its dependencies, and get it done. And that's where it takes complexity out of the picture. We're helping each other move forward with clarity, maintaining that unity, and obtaining a sustainable action, sustainable actions, because it's a continual process. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about reality focused. What does focused mean? Focused is facilitating. We all know that facilitating is leading a team, making things easier, making things better. We're going to facilitate on clear, unified, sustainable execution and delivery. But let's go into that a little bit further. Let's talk about each letter in the word focused. First, that F, it's facilitate. We take those tough conversations that build trust. As I mentioned earlier, we want to ask those questions. What did you mean? Where did you hear that? Where did that information come from? We won't put that focused on common ground and shared purpose. Are we speaking the same language? Are we on the same page? Do we understand what we're talking about? We want to make sure that it's that C for clear. We'll make sure that your communication and agreements are clear, one to the other. And it's okay to ask. One person may get frustrated because they don't quite know yet, but that's where we get into that process of listening in dialogue, and then write it down and break it down. Then we become unified. Actions across differences. Doesn't matter if you've got a better education, if you're older, younger, color of your skin, your salary level, your education level. We've still got to be unified across those differences to make sure that we're all going same direction, same path, same results. And it's got to be sustainable. We got to make sure that those results are going to last. Make sure we get across those differences and build results that last. Then it's about execution, taking action. That's that consistent, responsible action. It's the building that activity, growing forward. What does that give us? That's the D. That's delivery. Inspired growth and lasting change. That's how we are, reality focused, understanding what we need to do and teaming up with those around us to build a better world, one reality at a time. Love for you to contact us. Love to hear from you. Let's promote that clear, unified, sustainable action, and let's start now. Reach out. Reach out to explore my coaching, my courses, my workshops, or speaking engagements to promote unity leadership, a unified leadership. Let me come in. Let me help coach you, coach your teams, your company, even enterprise-wide, in helping us bring that communication, that collaboration together. Again, you get me at achievingunity.com. You can call me at 303-FOCUSED, 303-362-8733, which on your dial does spell 303-FOCUSED. Achieving unity is the path to stronger relationships, inspired leadership, and lasting change. Get in touch with me. I'd love to talk with you more, because in today's world of uncertainty, protection is not a luxury. It is a necessity. So whether you or your business needs help, talking even on the legal side, talking with attorneys, get in touch with me. Let's build that security. Let's take that uncertainty away. So again, we're all going same direction, same page, making tomorrow better than it's ever been before. And again, this is a weekly podcast. I'm sorry to say again, but it is. It's over and over every week. We've got a wonderful guest today, which we'll learn more about Maria in just a few minutes. Next week, we talk to Chip Rome. Has a very interesting ideas about STEM, STEM, science, technology, math, science, technology, engineering, and math. Those things teach us how things work. But now we're also adding another letter to it and making it STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And that helps us imagine what is possible, not just the facts, not just where we are today, but the arts to open us up into a bigger and better tomorrow. That's next week, April 15th. Then we got Teresa Cesaric. She'll be here on the 22nd. Performance Success Formula. Successfully pursue your passion. Do you have a passion? Do you know a passion? What would you like to be doing today? That's important. Then Mitch Creighton will be here. Great travel agent, travel officer, what he does. He's excellent at everything he does. He helps us make memories, not regrets. We'll talk about that in Building a Better World. Building better memories, not more regrets. Yeah, that's on April 29th. Then starting the month of May, our Mother's Day month, working with mothers and moms. And our first podcast guest will be Mila Johansson, and talk about the Cinderella monologues, where she came from, who her grandmother was, where she's been. It's an interesting story to find out things that we didn't know before, where women did have rights long before we might have known it. Please join us. That's on May 6th. If you want more information about this, please go out to my website. There's my QR code on the screen. Reality Focused Dynamics, Building Success Focused Solutions. Please take a picture of that page. That's the QR code. Get to us anytime. Use that QR code on your phone. Get to us, connect with us. achievingunity.com, markentricken.com are the easiest ways through the QR code. Please take a picture of that page. Thank you. Now, this is the big page of the day. This is where he starts getting excited for learning about who Maria is. This is the big part. This is where it all comes together in what we do and where we're going today to build this day so much more. To learn more about Maria Garaitonandia, use her QR code on the left. That's her YouTube. Find out more about her, what she's doing, videos she's had. On the right, that QR code. You get to her through Instagram, Facebook, or if you want to, email her. The email's on the bottom of the page, bottom right-hand side of the page. That's her direct email. So again, take a picture of this page. Use your phone. Take a picture. Get in touch with Maria. I know she wants to talk with you. Excuse me. Now let's introduce Maria a little bit more. We're excited to welcome Maria, a communication and conflict strategist who helps leaders, yes, you and I, plus teams build trust, improve collaboration for you and I, socially, huge companies, those big CEOs, multi-billion dollar CEOs, helping them overcome those hidden challenges that slow progress. With over 20 years of experience, Maria equips organizations with practical strategies to strengthen communication, deliver effective feedback, and manage expectations with that clarity, taking it to that next level. Her work empowers teams to break down those silos, resolve tension, and create stronger alignment. We're talking about the same page, the same path, that stronger alignment that drives faster, more meaningful results. Would you please help me welcome Maria Garaitonandia? Maria, how are you today?
Hi, Mark. I'm fine. Thank you so much. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Oh, it's exciting to have you here. It's the things that you do and that you share with people. It's exciting to see that ability for us to share with others how to take that next step, how to be able to dig in and go forward. So if you don't mind, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Maybe give us a little bit of an introduction. And then I wanted to ask more about, have you always known that communication become the heart of your life's work? How did you know that? But tell us more first about you. Who are you
Well,
and what do you do?
if I go back to the early days, it probably is linked directly to why I decided to do what I do. I am what you call a third culture kid, which means that my dad was a finance executive who got transferred from country to country as I was growing up, and my siblings as well. So we lived for 10 years, we lived in different countries. And as a kid, when you're yanked out of school in the middle of the year and you got to start in a brand new country, it's very nerve-wracking, but at the same time, you learn how to deal with change. And not only that, but you learn how to make mistakes gracefully and
I need that help.
adjust and figure out what's cool in this school, what's not cool. How do you say this and how do you not say that? And how do you not put your foot in your mouth? Both both in the language and also in the behaviors, right? Not everybody behaves in the same way. So that probably had a big impact in my life. And I think I knew that I always loved all things that had to do with culture, language, history, etc. So I was never going to go into the STEM, never going to go into that. I knew my calling had to do with people. So that's my history. My parents are Cuban. They left Cuba during the revolution, and then
Oh,
I'm first generation American born, but we lived in a bunch of different countries, and of course I'm back in the U.S. after 20 years of living in Mexico. So
that's exciting. And I've got a couple of questions here, if you don't mind. First off, how many languages do you speak?
well, I speak five.
Wow.
Perfectly, too. English and Spanish. I grew up with both languages, but then I lived in Italy, so I learned Italian as a kid, and then in school I learned French. Once you get one of the Latin languages, you kind of figure out the other ones. And my last language was Portuguese because I did a lot of work in Brazil, and
Wow.
that was a little tough, even though it's very similar to Spanish, but the pronunciation isn't quite the same. So yes, I love languages and culture for sure.
I could see learning all those from what I heard. And I spent a winter in Mexico and learned a little bit of Spanish. It was so interesting, but the way they use terms, especially for masculine and feminine, is much different than the US. And then how you've picked up all these other languages and where they live. And I don't know how much of it's true, but I've heard that even gestures are different
I've got
in
some
different
funny
places.
stories, but probably not appropriate for here.
I'll have to catch up on those later then, Maria. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So you asked me, did I always know that this was going to be my calling, communication? As you can see, it was something that was instilled in me at a very early age. However, there's I guess one situation that I can recall when I was a teenager. We were in our last country, which was Mexico, and my dad was frustrated because being a Cuban American, he had a very blunt, direct style. He just said it as he thought or saw it, and that was it. And he was assuming that since Mexicans spoke Spanish just like him, that they understood. However, he didn't realize that Mexico is a culture where face saving is very important, where preserving people's dignity is very important. And he was complaining, and I remember perfectly what he said. He said, I just don't understand people here. You need to use baby powder before you say anything. And, and that was his frustration. And yet, as a teenager, I had already picked up on a lot of the nuances because I guess when you're younger and you've done it a few times, it's like language ability. You can learn it a lot faster when you're younger, and it might be a little harder the older you get. And seeing him struggle stayed with me. And as time went by, and I thought I was going to go into foreign service, but that didn't happen. But when as I developed in my professional career and I realized that cross-cultural training and cross-cultural coaching was something that I could do that would actually help other executives like my dad to figure out how to speak to people and how to interpret things, that's when I thought I can do that because I get it. I've been there and I've done that. And after getting into the cross-cultural niche or segment, I realize that a lot of those same skills are applicable regardless of whether it's a homogeneous culture or a heterogeneous culture. There are many abilities that you can apply which have to do with observing and adjusting and being situational, like you mentioned, right?
That is so true. And knowing when I was growing up, we didn't travel. I would travel from where I live. I was born in southern Mississippi. We went out to southwest New Mexico or southeast New Mexico, and that's where I grew up. I went from a somewhat a more black, as it's called. I like to call it just a darker skin, out to New Mexico where it was a little bit darker skin, but not quite as dark, to my skin, which wasn't quite, it definitely wasn't white. And learning all that process and what we were doing, I was a little bit even confused. Just talking about it brings confusion in my mind to learn that, but I didn't travel much outside of that to see the other parts of what we see on TV. Back then, of course, there was no internet. So what was on the television was all I see to see the rest of the world. And of course, each reporter has their own opinion that they share or don't share with us. But then about 20 years ago, I started traveling, and that gave me just a small opening in the door for me to see how other people lived and how they reacted. Going to Europe and going to the Caribbean and then staying in Mexico for the winter, I've opened up a lot in what I do. But just to look at you, I'd love to hear more about yours because it seems that you spent 20 years of coaching global teams, and it seems to me that it would give you just a very broad view of people and how much maybe you've noticed some universal struggles that show up no matter what industry, culture, or generation you might be working with. Is that true?
Yes, well, there are certain universals. It depends on what you're talking about. So, for example, one thing that I noticed working cross-culturally was that the main challenge that I found, for example, US versus Mexico or Latin America in general, was that the way that you're raised, you don't realize it. You think you're an objective being, but you don't realize you've got this big filter in front of you, and your mom and dad and school and society and community have taught you what the rules of the game are. What's considered courteous, what's not, what's the proper protocol, what's not, how do you ask for stuff? all of that, all of those things, if you don't know the rules of the game, it's really hard to play the game because everyone's playing with different rules. So that is where the cross-cultural knowledge is very important. Not everybody's going to know it. You don't know what you don't know. So when you see a behavior that seems strange, you start judging it according to the filter that you've been raised with. When you start living in a culture for longer time, that's when you understand the why behind the behavior. It becomes a little easier. Now, that's in a cross-cultural scenario. Now, in a homogeneous scenario, one of the things that I have found that trips up a lot of leaders and teams is how do I speak to you or how do I ask you to start or stop doing something or change something or continue to do something. That's where people get tripped up because you don't know if a person is more relationship face saving oriented or if the person is more pragmatic and maybe more task oriented. These are dimensions that you can take from the cross-cultural world, but apply them also into our homogeneous environments. Because again, not everybody was raised by the same parents. Even if you were, you have different personalities, different preferences. Somebody might prefer more blunt communication, somebody might prefer more diplomatic communication. So a lot of that requires observing and great leaders know how to do that. They know how to read the room, how to pick up on the nuances, to pick up on the personality styles and figure out how to speak the person's language so that they'll
And Maria,
receive it.
if you don't mind, I'd like to interrupt you right there because, like you said, the good leaders, the better leaders know how to do that. Well, they learned that, right? It wasn't inborn. We all have to learn that. And I think a lot of it, as you did, going from country to country, person to person, company to company, corporation to corporation, enterprise to enterprise, each one of them has their own attitude, their own personality. And then with each person within that corporation, they have their own, whether you're in South America, North America, Brazil, Colorado, we all have our own differences, right? And that's about learning those things. And we all have to be open. When I talk about listening and dialogue, we have to listen to people and write it down so we can learn it and then
Mhm.
break it down so it makes sense. Is that right?
Yes, yes, it has to do with, and again, and you make mistakes. You don't all of a sudden, I mean, yes, some people do have an innate way of figuring people out. But like you said, it is something that can be learned, and practice makes progress. The more you observe
Practice
and
makes
the more you
progress.
learn how to adjust, the better you become.
I
So,
like the way you said that. That practice makes progress. And it's something that we need to put as a desire, right? We need to want to do that. It's like a lot of times on the news that we hear, hopefully a lot of it we, for lack of better words, just blow it off. That's just what they're saying. But the things that we need to know, that we need to learn, and like you're saying, dealing with other people, working with other people, partnering with other people, that's a learning. And as you mentioned, when you're talking to someone in Brazil or someone in Cancun or in some parts of Mexico or different states, even me being from the South and moved out west, and how people act and react. And don't we also, Maria, have things that we almost find as a negative towards some people, that maybe that prejudice, that culture difference that we
yeah, and
see?
I think most of the time those biases are probably they're ingrained because we try to compartmentalize in our brain in order to understand things a little easier. So you'll see a pattern, you're like, oh, this is this, this means that. And then you're predisposed to think that it's always going to be that way. Um, and biases aren't bad. They're just the way that we learn how to deal with a complex world. It's just the matter of being aware that not everything's going to fit into a nice little square category. And to be open, that's why we need to observe and adjust also the way that we perceive things or the conclusions that we might be tempted to make about a group of people or a place. So yeah, I think I agree with you. It's a matter of keeping yourself open.
And that continual learning too, right? It's
Right.
everyone is different and we want to part of unity to benefit everyone because everyone has good in them. Their choice to express it, of course, is theirs, and we need to work with that. Back to learning. We need to learn how to do that. But even as I look at you and your title, leadership, communication strategist, that goes beyond just talking and listening. Can you help our audience understand more about what that really means in practice and on a typical day at work?
Yes, basically, I help teams and leaders untangle all of this places like those knots where they get stuck, where operations is having difficulty with commercial because everybody's working in their own silo and the way that they measure their KPIs is a little different. And yet they don't understand perhaps the cross-functional issues that each is dealing with. And sometimes it's hard to, verbalize it, say, listen, here's where I'm having this problem. I know that we have to work towards one same goal. How do we work this out? Sometimes you can get so stuck in what you need to get done because you always have, on the one hand, your objective, and on the other hand, you have relationships, and you can't separate them because you need other people to get stuff done. So you can't just be focusing on your objective and forget about other people. You need to make sure you're balancing both your objective and your relationships to a point where you can move forward and untangle all of those knots. So that's where I come in and help people, whether it's to give feedback or to request things with clarity or work cross-culturally or even cross-generationally. That's where I help people out, my clients out.
Wow, that's so impressive. And I like the way you said about people working together to get things done. That's achieving unity. It's not a point where you're all just buddy buddy, but as you mentioned, those KPIs, those key performance indicators, to achieve those, it's about us working together, us being able to, we don't have to be friends that we're always together. We can maybe only see each other at work and maybe only for a few minutes a day. But to build that unity, to achieving that unity, as you're talking about coming together, working together, understand the differences, but also understand what do we need to do, get that key performance indicator accomplished. How do we reach our goals? I think you mentioned earlier, what's the objective and how do we work together to make that happen?
Exactly.
Have you ever
That's
worked with someone who is absolutely, let's just say, brilliant at their job, whose communication habits were quietly costing them opportunities? I mean, this is someone that's just very, very intelligent, but their communication wasn't where it needed to be, wasn't where it should be. They weren't
yes.
learning. So that those opportunities, relationships, or trust, and what it was like for helping them to turn, what was it like for you to help them turn that around?
Yes, I had a commercial director who was killing it. He was doing really well, but for some reason his team started deflating. I'll just say that. And his 360 came back a little weak. And the problem was what his team was reporting was that they were getting burnout because even though they were making really good objectives and numbers, the leader didn't celebrate those wins and didn't realize that recognition is a key element in maintaining that morale. So, and he actually realized it, admitted it. He said, I realized that when it comes to congratulating my team, I'll do something like, guys, good job, but don't get a little too cocky because we still have a lot to do. And so he just didn't know how to let good enough lay, right? He just kept, and so I guess his team was getting a little tired and frustrated, like nothing's ever going to be good enough for this guy. And once he realized that he just had to bask in the success for a little moment and no buts, things would probably turn around and let his team take that deep breath and be more motivated for the next challenge. So that was a beautiful moment when he realized that.
Yeah.
And it was something simple that he was able to adjust. Again, it's just a matter of communication, maybe also a little bit on the outlook. If you're Many leaders are very results oriented, but again, it's
Mhm.
not just results. You got to think about your relationships as well.
And that goes back to what I heard you talk about your key performance indicators. Get those key performance indicators accomplished and congratulate your team. No buts.
No buts.
Congratulations, you did it.
Yes,
No if ands, no nothing, if ands, whatever might be the process, you did it. Congratulations. And let them accept that because that was good, right?
exactly.
And then you mentioned a 360. That's his circle. That's his realm. When you say reaching his 360, tell us more.
A 360 is a tool that is used for many leaders where you give your boss, you give your peers, and you give your team a questionnaire so that they can evaluate how you're doing. And it gives you a 360-degree view of what other people may see that you might not be seeing. There might be things you do see, but others that you don't. So it gives you this wonderful feedback that comes from different sides. And that's what I meant by the 360.
That's excellent. And everyone needs to be using something like that. That's great to do that 360, that whole realm, their circle, your world in the process. So as we look at this and maybe we rethink communication, what communication actually means, have you noticed that leaders often confuse being heard with being understood? And would you say that that gap is one of the quieter reasons so many teams feel, as you mentioned earlier, a little bit about that when they say that, but even when everyone is technically talking, have you noticed that the leaders often confuse that I said it, but they may not have understood it? How do you work with that kind of a gap?
I hear a lot of leaders say, I keep finding myself repeating myself over and over again, to which I may say, okay, there can be either a matter of training where people are afraid to admit that they don't know how to do something, or it could be that they don't understand the reasoning behind the request, in which case they might just be, I guess, dragging their feet or being a little resistant to change because again, change can be daunting and sometimes people aren't quite as willing to jump on the bandwagon, especially if they don't understand the why behind it. And what I recommend, and I mentioned this in my book and in my framework called Clear, when you are working with a team, especially when it comes to making a request, giving feedback, maybe changing a process, it helps a lot to start off conveying context. That's my framework. I know you like frameworks too, right? So in my Clear framework, the first step is context. Tell people where you're coming from. Tell them why you're about to make the request you're making. Tell them what your vision or your objective is before you get into the what and the how. If you start with that why, it helps the other person align and it affords them the courtesy of sharing your reasoning. And the conversation will be a lot more like a brainstorming rather than a ping pong of battle of wills. Because when you just tell somebody, we're changing a process, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, the first thing that comes into my mind is, no, why? Why do I have to learn something new? Why do I have to? If you start with that why, that context, it'll be a little bit easier. And even if I still don't agree, at least I understand where you're coming from. And maybe I can help solve the problem, or maybe I can
Beautiful.
contribute to the solution. it makes it a lot easier. So convey context first. And while you're conveying context, the other person can follow you. And then, like you mentioned, there's the listening and empathizing. And that means open-ended questions in order to understand the other person's perspective. There may be an objection. Where is it? Open-ended questions will let you understand it right away. And then finally, the A and the R is adjust. And that means it could be that you're adjusting because the information you had originally might change once you listen and empathize. It's like, oh, it's not what I thought it was in the beginning. So now you have new information. You might be able to adjust in your mind and then reframe. It means anything from speaking their language to making a different type of proposal to suggesting something in conjunction or negotiating or something of the sort. But at the end, you come out with a better product than you did in the beginning when you just started that conversation.
And that's so important. That is so true. I'll go a couple of things here just quickly. And one of the things that we've most of us heard of the book about why, asking your why. Doesn't that why bring value? I mean, if you've got a why, even for ourselves personally, we've got a why for something. It gives us the opportunity to buy in because there's value. And we see the value, right?
Yes, and this is where I tell leaders, look, if you find yourself in a situation where you are being the spokesperson for a process that you don't fully buy, you need to work on your own why and understand that fully before you try to communicate it to somebody else because it'll come right through if you can't sell what you don't buy yourself. So it's especially when it comes to change management or communicating change, it's very important to work first on your own mindset so that you can process, at least understand the why behind the action, and then be able to communicate it in turn to others.
So well said. Thank you. Now I'd like, if you don't mind, let's go back to your clear model, how it gives leaders, again, that framework they can actually use in real time rather than just theory. Could you walk us through again? You talked about it a few seconds ago, but could you help us again go through what clear stands for and give us another moment where you saw it genuinely change a conversation that may have been heading in the wrong direction?
Okay, I'll give you the example of another leader I was coaching, and she was telling me that her team just wasn't getting on board with a process, a new process. And again, we find that in today's day and age, change is constant. We're seeing you just start a process and then within a very short time it's something else. And it's probably going to be that way completely all the time. So I suggested to her to use the clear method. Context, listen, empathize, adjust, and reframe.
Thank
So
you.
first start, and so she started out instead of saying, "Guys, we're doing this new process." She says, "We have lots of rework with our current process, and it's weighing us down, and we have to do a lot of corrections. So we're going to try." And you knew, see, she started with the conveying the context. So we'd like to start with a new process to save us time. Convey context. Okay, so then they're like, okay, well, yeah, it's true. We are wasting a lot of time. Yes, we do have a lot of rework. Okay. At that point, then, if there's still a little bit of pushback, you listen and you empathize. So what about this new process that we're trying to get on board? Is there any element that's causing difficulties for you? And then at that point, she found out it wasn't so much the process itself, but rather the skepticism that learning a new process was going to be worth their while, because what if after all that we invest time and it's not going to work? And so she realized it's not the process itself that's tedious, it's rather not understanding whether it was going to be worth it. Okay, so she got some new information so that she could adjust and reframe the message so that her team would come on board. So she adjusted it she admitted to them, yes, there is a learning curve. Yes, it took me X amount of time to learn this, but I found that at the end of it, it decreased the error output by 70%, and that shaved off 3 hours a week. And so she was able to give them real numbers, which is what they were really concerned about. Was this really going to save them time? And that with that reframing, it made it a lot easier for the team to come on board and actually give the process a try.
Saw the value.
They did.
That's excellent. I love the way you talked about that and how you helped us again with clear and what that means. It's a way that we can use, and I'm big on acronyms because it's a way that we can remember things. Of course, I have all my acronyms up here on my wall, so I do remember them and I do use them. But it gives us that way to put that context into what we talk about, and that why, as you mentioned, to give that value, which allows the buy-in to what we're doing, right?
Exactly.
And as you talk about that, and I'm going to use the word shift, have you found that most communication problems are actually solvable with that one shift? I think you used a different word, different words, but that one small shift, that one change in how a leader frames a message, asks the questions, or even the ability to listen. And what's that shift to you that comes back to most often? Where does that go?
I think that the shift is has a lot to do with self-confidence because the big gaps come when people are nervous or not confident in how to approach a conversation, and they wind up avoiding it until it gets bigger. It's kind of like sweeping dirt under a rug and keep sweeping it under the rug, and then all of a sudden there's this big lump in the middle of the rug, and you keep tripping on it and tripping it. It gets bigger and bigger, and that's what I think I would compare the avoidance, right? The problem's still there, but you're just not addressing it. And I think that that is sometimes what people fret about, not having the tools or the confidence to feel like they can address a difficult conversation. I would say that's usually that where that shift has to take place. If you feel confident enough because you have the tools, you've practiced, even if you make mistakes and you go in with certain vulnerability and certain openness, the more you do it, the more self-confident you become, and it becomes easier to navigate those knots of
Yes.
communication.
That you have to go over all the time, climbing that hill, and
Yes,
because of that. And I like the way you talk about that because it helps us do what you said, address the problem. You address it.
exactly.
And as I say, take action. Those actions are so important that you're doing something.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, let's go to your book, Untangling
Mhm.
Communication. And that seems to was it born from real coaching stories? Have you found that readers connect most deeply, not to the strategies, but to the stories that you help talk about?
Yes, and I start the book with a road rage story that happened to me in Mexico City. I had a friend that like, "Oh, Maria, I didn't know you had that side of you." And I said, "Well, live and learn, that's, when you make the mistakes and see yourself in a situation where you're like, "Okay, I got to stop this." That's where you realize where your growth has to take you. And so that's when I started the chapter on conflict management, that came back to me because that was the low point of my emotional intelligence. and and I mean, it was a number of years ago, but I haven't had road rage issues since, thank goodness.
I can remember some. I'm going to read your book because I have some of those stories too, especially road rage. Believe it
Yeah.
or not, I was younger yesterday than I am today. And I've learned a few things because I used to be one of those crazy drivers. Had my high speed Trans Am, big engine, four on the floor. I was there in those days and look back today and how crazy that I was. But look, at least I see it now and I can see that difference. I've noticed that. So, and quickly, I want to stay with your book because I hope you're going to tell us in a few minutes how we can get this book. But have you also noticed that leaders who learn to say no clearly without any kind of guilt, without over explaining, and while keeping that relationship intact, tend to gain more respect, not less, but gain more respect? And how do you help someone develop that skill when they have spent years and maybe even decades saying yes to everything?
Well, a good leader has to make that balance between the objectives. You're not an altruistic company, right? You need to worry about the bottom line. And sometimes those are some of the things that my clients ask me to help with. How do you say no without alienating the other party? And it is a balance between objective and relationship. And simply using that first step, that conveying context, helps, regardless of whether you're speaking to a client or to a colleague. You're asking me, for example, you might say, you're asking me to do X, Y, and Z. That would cause this other thing, which will in turn be very difficult. How about instead we do blah, blah, blah? So you don't even have to say no explicitly, just by giving that context, the other person's understanding what problem that would cause for you, and then you jump right into the alternative. And it kind of sandwiches the no in a way that's so discreet that you're basically going into more of a brainstorming exercise instead of, sorry, I can't help you. That's not going to work for me. Because that way it seems selfish and it doesn't seem like you're willing to be a team player or to be collaborative, etc. If you can go from the implication for you and then offering an alternative, that's the way that you keep that relationship piece intact without sacrificing also your objective.
I like the way you talk about that too. It's not about saying no, it's about clarifying the conversation. And I like that because it's sometimes you just want to yell out no, but there's better ways to do that. And to achieve unity, you're able to, as I think you're saying, I call it my lid with bid rid gid framework. It's about that listening first in dialogue, listening what they say, not just jumping out with that big no, but write down what they're saying because many times what someone else is saying has a lot of value. But sometimes, even as they speak and as they write it down and start to break it down, we can start seeing some places where maybe it does work. But other places, maybe we go back to your CLEAR acronym, other places where it does not work. Do you see that sometimes?
You mean when people use a certain methodology and it doesn't always work? Is that what you're saying?
Right. And when they're saying something, when somebody comes back to that, what I'm going on is to being able to say no, because there's times where people come up and you want to say no, but as you're talking about that ability to listen to them first and listen to what they have in context and then understanding it better, it might explain why the other person wants to say no more than just someone just blurting it out. But again, showing and sharing that value, the context of where it
Yeah,
belongs.
that's where the listening and empathizing comes in. If you're listening not just for the words, but also listening for the emotions behind or the body language and the tone, if you can listen for all that, you might not have 100% sure what's behind it, but you can explore a little bit more, and maybe by asking the open-ended questions. Could be anything from, I'm sensing that you have an objection to this. Tell me more. An open-ended question like that can let the other person open up and be more frank and feel like they can maybe share something that they haven't shared up until that moment, rather than just, um, You don't agree with this, do you?
Mhm.
That's a closed-ended question. So it's better to get people to share a little bit more so that you have more quality information, and that'll help you be able to move forward with an adjusting and a reframing and speaking the other person's language or making a proposal that's more palatable to them rather than just pushing forward with the same proposal.
I like what you're saying. That makes it so much more clear. And that's what I talk about in the including, encouraging, inspiring, and including. I have an article on my site and it talks about get the you out of here. Quit saying you. People say, well, you this, you this. You're saying you don't agree with this, do you? Well, let's take that back and kind of like the L in your clear, that ability to listen and learn more, learn both sides. Does that seem to fit in pretty good also?
Yes, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
Thank you. Well, tell us quickly more about your book. And if I wanted to buy your book, what would I do?
The book is called Untangling Communication, and it is available on Amazon or wherever you get your books online. Or you can find it on my webpage, which is mariagaraitonandia.com. And just a little note, the way that you pronounce it is like you're giving directions to somebody to go to a place called Nandia instead of Narnia. Go right to
So, Narnia,
Nandia. That's the way it's easy to say it that
go
way.
right to Nandia.
Go right to Nandia.
Okay.
You can find me. I'm Maria. I think I'm the only Maria Garaitonandia on LinkedIn. You'll probably know. Anybody with my last name is probably related to me. It's a long Basque last name from northern Spain, a place that's very isolated. So, not a lot of these long, strange last names out there. And You can also find it at global. My other webpage is globalbridgestraining.com. So any of those places or wherever you buy your books, Untangling Communication.
Untangling Communication, Maria Garaitonandia, and that's spelled Garaitonandia. Right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So just put the G Maria and the Garait, and I think, like she mentioned, I think you will find it. That's excellent.
Yeah.
That
13
book,
letters.
13 letters, a lucky number. I love that.
Yeah.
Good deal. Wow. Thank you, Maria. Thanks for joining us today, sharing your experience, your wisdom, your heart, which I heard come out so often, your practical wisdom with our listeners. I think so much about what you're doing, what you're sharing, about your book, and how we can all use that so much in what we do. So as we close today's conversation, one thing I think comes very clear. Real change happens when vision meets action. We take that action, as we talked about earlier, and when people come together with purpose, with that understanding, with that value that we have going forward. So as we wrap up today's conversation, Maria, thank you again. Thank you so much for being here today. What you have shared, I think, reminds us all that communication is not just a skill. It's not just a skill that we use at work, because I think everything that you told us about today, we can use at work, we use our friends, socially, at home with our family. Maria, I think what you're talking about is the foundation of every relationship, every team, and every goal that we want to achieve together. That's the way it goes. Maria, go right to India. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a very valued guest at the Achieving Unity Leadership System podcast, and for helping us continue turning pain into purpose. Because a lot of the things that you're talking about initially are pains that we build that mound, we sweep it under that rug until we come out of that and then turn that pain into purpose, level it out, and turn that disconnection into unity. Thank you so much. As
Thank
Maria
you,
spoke,
Mark.
it's my pleasure, and I've learned a lot today, and I love learning, and learning from people like you makes it so valuable. So as Maria spoke to us today, if you want to go deeper with Maria, pick up her book. Again, Untangling. untangling communication. What we all need, untangling communication. Visit her website. This is mariagaraitonandia.com. That's Maria, Mariagagar. There's a smaller writing here. I'll get up closer. AITONANDIA.com. Again, just type in the Maria and the GAR. I bet you can find it. I found it. It was quick. It was easy. But connect with her. Connect with her on LinkedIn. And I hope you took a picture of her QR codes, the slide earlier. Maria's QR code to get to her. If not, this podcast will be available on YouTube / at Mark Intrican before close of business on Friday. So you can go out there, listen to this again, share it with your friends. Let more people learn about what Maria is doing and how she's helping. Because as achieving unity resonates with more and more of us, please follow that feeling. Reach back out to me and connect. AchievingUnity.com or MarkIntrican.com. My name is not quite 13 characters, but it's enough out there that there's not many of us. But that please get out there, get to us, and let's work on better communication, untangling, and let's work together to make life better for all of us. So again, Maria, thank you. Thank you for being here. Well, get out there, get to your book. But until next time, let us continue to transform that complexity into execution, chaos into connection, and our purposes of the communication, like Maria was talking about, into action. Let us continue achieving unity in every way possible. And call me, 303-362-8733, which I hope you know, or help you remember, means 303 focused. Get in touch with me. I hope you all remember that I'm here for you. Maria is here for you. Get in contact with her, talk to her. We can stay focused on listening and dialogue, writing it down, break it down, get it done. Review its dependencies. We need to work together for better collaboration and communication as we achieve unity by harnessing the power of EII. Encourage others. Tell somebody, good job. Inspire others. Tell them what they're doing is good. And then include them in anything and everything you do. It helps us building better businesses, better lives, and a better world. And Maria, thank you over and over. And I hope everyone gets out there to get your book. This is Mark Intrican with the Achieving Unity Leadership System, reminding you that life is truly about what we make it. Let us help everyone around us feel seen, heard, and supported in everyday moments, the moments that truly matter, and make life awesome together in unity. Thank you all. Maria, I have learned so much today. You're so appreciated. Thanks again for your message, showing us how to move past surface level arguments to find those real solutions in what we do. Hope to see you all again next week with our next step in remembering unity is not a soft skill. Unity is a leadership discipline. Till then, thank you all. Cheers.